It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. We now know it's official. We know who the people on the ballot in the November election are going to be. You got Biden on one side, you got Trump on the other. Any surprise? No, not shocking at all. And hey, all day Tuesday, what did we hear? We heard about how old Joe Biden is. Yeah. And look, Democrats, how old Donald Trump is, fighting over the cognitive ability of the two candidates of the major parties in the country. And you know what we're not talking about? We're not talking about how to make people's lives better. We're not talking about how to fill the potholes and create the jobs. We're talking about how old. And why? Well, because on Tuesday, we had to bring in Robert Hur, special counsel, to investigate Joe Biden's handling of classified documents. Or, this is the part I love, or the reality is the handling of the classified documents by a bunch of staff people who, didn't know what they were handling. And because if Joe Biden is feeble, if he's unable to do anything, I'm sure he wasn't carrying these heavy boxes of documents in and out of the garage or out of the University of Delaware or wherever they were. I'm sure there were staffers who were going, hey, we got to move and go. Now, we should have a serious conversation about how we handle classified documents, how much stuff we classify. Sure, these are things we could have spent a much better use of congressional time other than 4 or 5 hours grilling this special prosecutor on why he didn't indict Joe Biden. And, on the other side, clearly on why the guy, felt the need to interject. Joe Biden's old and he has memories. People would be sympathetic. That's why. No, you didn't prosecute him because the bar to prosecute this kind of a crime is really high. You've got to prove that there was some intent that they knew they were taking them. And you couldn't. It wasn't there. And my problem with all of this this politicizing of what the special counsel had put out is that, again, we're still not talking about the main issues. We're talking about the sideshows. And boy, do we love our sideshows or what? Do we love our bread and circus? Sadly, some of us do. Now, clearly, when Robert Hur testified, Republicans were angry, as I said, by the fact that they didn't indict Biden. On the Democratic side, clearly they were upset that they interjected the little bit about his cognitive ability, which, again, I don't know how Robert Hur could come up with that. I don't think he's I don't think he's a psychiatrist. I don't think they did any testing. This was purely an opinion of which he doesn't have the skill. Now, where he does have the skill is that of a prosecutor, knowing what he can take to court and what he can't win in court, and what he knows not going to win this case. I like how the Washington Post reported on this, basically saying, because here's what Republicans want you to believe. They want us to believe that the situation with Trump and his classified documents issues and Biden and these classified document issues are the same. And they're not. Not even close. They're very different, much like their policies that we aren't obviously talking about because we're talking about, hey, did you know Joe Biden's old? And of course, the Democrats had to throw out, did you know Donald Trump's old? So we're going to be fighting over two old guys. And do they know where the house keys are? Instead of the policies. And this is where the wealth class wants us. This is where the moneyed interest wants us fighting, not over the policies that Biden laid out in his State of the Union. No, we shouldn't be talking about that. But the Washington Post hit it clearly, succinctly, when they wrote, among the many reasons Donald Trump was charged with possession of classified documents and Biden wasn't. Well, one, more classified documents and more materials were at Mar-a-Lago, and two, and this is the punchline. This is the important part of this, and it's what I've said all along. Prosecutors have evidence that Trump tried to obstruct the government from getting their stuff back. That's the crime. That's the problem. Look, we've had people who have had classified documents and notebooks with their notes in it and diaries and all of this stuff forever. George Washington had diaries. Ronald Reagan had them up until Nancy tried to put them on display. And then they said, hey, no, we got to have those back. You can't put that stuff out in public. It's that part of going, no, you can't have it back. Mine. It's that 2-year-old. Mine. And then going on the defensive saying, I have the right to have all this stuff. I did this miraculous kind of executive order that no one can find. It's in a drawer somewhere. You just have to look for it. That basically declassifies everything and lets him take everything home, which is nonsense. There's no such thing. But here we are. We're arguing over, again, the show, the horse race, look over here while we're robbing you blind. Look over here at this train wreck while real train wrecks are destroying our cities. Real train wrecks that are destroying our economy. This is where I keep coming back to. Our mainstream corporate controlled media is not focused on the right stuff. And we talked about this the other day. Fact of the matter is, they're trying to play both sides-isms. They're trying to say, oh, look, they're the same, the two old guys, but with very different policies. I argue the Republicans don't have any real policies. And we've talked about that extensively over the last couple of months. The fact that there's nothing. There's nothing on healthcare. There's nothing on jobs. There's nothing on how to fight inflation. All they know how to do is point their finger and say, it's Joe Biden's fault. Biden came armed to the State of the Union with the, hey, this is my vision. This is my agenda. This is what I want to do. These are the policies that I want to move forward. That's what we should be focusing on. That's the world that we as working people should be demanding, not this sideshow stuff. Oh, but Rick, this is classified information. Yeah, but it's not the same. I know they're trying to make the horse race because Republicans need this. They need to be able to say, see, well, Joe Biden, he did what Trump did and they're not going after him. They want to play the victim in this without acknowledging the fact that what Trump did was wrong. And in a big way, that part of going, yeah, okay, oops, we had some mixed in with papers. Oh, hey, yeah, here, give it back, which has been the policy for, as far as I know, it's that mine. So for me, I'm hoping we, you, me, us, we the voters, stop tuning into this garbage and start saying, look, where's the meat? Where's the beef? Where is the substance of this campaign and how you're going to lower inflation, create good jobs, get health care, education, all of this for folks? For me, that's where we should be focused, 100%. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Thanks for tuning in to The Rick Smith Show. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @Rick Smith Show, like us on Facebook, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find all that and much more at thericksmithshow.com.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I love the fact that President Biden talked about climate, talked about a lot of things in the State of the Union, but hit on the climate issue. And look, I love the fact that he came out and was very direct, saying, look, I see a future where we save the planet from the climate. I see a future where we do something. That, to me, really, really exciting stuff. He also talked about making historic investments in confronting the climate crisis and not denying it. And he said, quote, I'm taking the most significant action on climate ever in the history of the world. And immediately my right-wing friends lost their minds. How could he say such a thing? And I'm not 100% sure. I know we've done a lot, but ever in the history of the world? Well, here to share some thoughts on maybe if that is accurate. I sure am hoping it is. I've asked Mike Williams to come talk with us. Mike's a senior fellow on domestic climate policy there at the Center for American Progress. Mike, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. Always a pleasure.
So this statement, I've done, this, I'm taking the most significant action on climate ever in the history of the world. Is that State of the Union speak for, hey, look at me, or is he actually doing that?
Read it and take heart, Rick. It's true. It's absolutely true. Amazing to think that it's true, because, honestly, we have a long way to go as a country and as a planet. But, yes, unequivocally so. Your right-wing friends are wrong, as they are probably often, and especially on issues of climate change. But by many different metrics, the actions taken under the Biden administration are the most significant action ever on the climate crisis in the history of the world, in terms of industrial economies. The massive amount of investments, they're driving emissions down from the power sector. They're driving emissions down from the transportation sector. It's putting us on a pace that's faster than what folks in Europe have done and elsewhere. So, yes, and certainly any other president who's come before him, there were efforts made under the Obama administration that gave us some progress, but it was incremental. And obviously Trump and the Bushes, right. The second Bush especially, monumental. So yes, it's true.
No, so I guess the follow-up question is this because the bar was so low, or is it because we're really doing something?
We're really doing something. The bar was low, so let's just be clear, but we are really doing something. So what we needed to do was to get to a decarbonized economy, an economy that effectively did not put more emissions into the air at all by 2050. And we are getting pretty close to on pace to doing that because of the actions of the Biden administration. There's more we need to do to truly get on pace for that. But we are there. We have gone from not just below zero, especially under the previous guy, to getting there. And so it was a low bar, but I'm trying to think of an amazing high jumper. LeBron James jumped over that low bar.
No, and this is good because look, I want people to understand that, come November, this could all go away. I mean, if this is truly, the great stuff that we've been asking for, if it's moving us in the direction that our children and our grandchildren need us to be moving toward, I'm thrilled to hear it. But also understand, come November, it all could possibly go away.
Yes, it all could possibly go away if Trump is elected in November. It all probably will go away. All the progress. Trump was a disaster in his 4 years in office for the environment writ large, but especially for the climate crisis. Absolutely atrocious. Emissions went up. Jobs didn't even go up. When he said he's going to save the coal industry, he didn't, and yet emissions still went up. Pollution standards stagnated. Air quality was worse. It was terrible. And the crazy thing is he wants to do even more in terms of the bad stuff. There's this horrible thing called Project 2025 by the Heritage Foundation, and it's effectively about gutting the federal government, which includes the Environmental Protection Agency, which is the place where the regulations and assurances that we have clean air, clean water, and we do something about the climate crisis. They want to get rid of that.
Yeah, no, we've been talking about.
Said he wants to do that.
Yeah, we've been talking about the potential of making patronage great again. And what Project 2025 is. We're going to use Schedule F to fire all of the bureaucrats and all of the people who do the work that need to be done for our government every day. And we're going to put in loyalists, people who are not qualified to do the job, but sufficiently loyal to do what they're told, which means never mind that climate stuff, never mind, clean water, clean air, clean, food that you want to eat. Never mind that. Let corporate America police themselves, because evidently they do such a great job.
Yes. The crazy thing is, people might listen to us and say, oh, these two guys are just ranting and raving. Who knows if he's actually going to do this? If you look at the words the man uses and the actual documentation from the Heritage Foundation, he is literally saying he's going to roll back and gut environmental protections. That's what he's saying. He said he was going to start doing it his last time, and he did start doing it. He wasn't lying about that, sadly.
No,
he lies about so many other things, but about gutting environmental protections and giving us dirtier air, no.
And I think it's important to take the man at his word. I mean, yesterday we talked about the fact that he wants to cut Social Security. That's something they've wanted to do for a very long time. You've got him saying in his words and his actions as president, we're going to go after the EPA and dirtier water. And, take us back to the good old days, like when I was a kid in the 70s, where you couldn't breathe because the air was so badly polluted. And we had smog indexes and days where we couldn't go outside. You watched the news to decide which days you could send your kids outside because the air quality was, polluted just enough so that you go out and play.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Rick. It's such a ridiculous trade-off too. We're trading dirtier air. We're going to have a climate crisis, even more so than what we would have without any of the actions Joe Biden had. So let's just make it terrible. And why are we doing that? Supposed economic activity, where if we look at the actual impact of President Biden's policies, his climate policies, they've been huge for job creation. Yeah. Huge. In fact, the quote you used in the State of the Union, the literal next two sentences are cutting our carbon emissions in half by 2030, creating tens of thousands of clean energy jobs like IBEW members, building 500,000 electrical vehicle chargers. And that's not just fancy State of the Union speak. That's literally underway. That's underway because of the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act. So we can have cleaner air, cleaner water, and we're on pace to deal with the climate crisis and high quality union jobs, or we can go back to having.
No, just stop there. I go, yes, please. I'll take the first one. Give me door A.
Yeah. No, because door B is not on all the rest.
Now, he also talked about his climate corps, a pattern. He said, patterned after the Peace Corps and the AmeriCorps. They're going to put 20,000 young people to work, working on our clean energy future. And I think that's a great thing, a call to action, a way to get young people involved in their future and actually getting to the point where we want to get to. I think we want clean air and water. At least I do.
I do too. I mean, you're from Ohio, Rick. Didn't you had a river that caught on fire once upon a time?
Stop it.
That
was
the
in
reason
the 50s.
why that doesn't reason why that doesn't happen anymore is because of the Clean Water Act. That's one of the laws, the landmark laws that Trump wants to gut. On the other hand, we have President Biden, who wants to put young people to work to give us clean water, to support that law and make it better for more people. So we don't have examples like Flint, Michigan, where people deal with lead in their waters. Kids deal with lead in their waters. Instead, they have clean drinking water.
Now, and to defend my hometown of Cleveland, when I grew as a kid growing up, you didn't go into Lake Erie because it was basically dead. The only time I ever saw fish in Lake Erie is they were floating sideways with one eye looking up at the sky. They were all dead. Now thriving ecosystem, fishing, all kinds of stuff in Lake Erie. It's been fantastic for the city, all because we prioritized clean water and clean air. I don't want to go back.
No. And you know what? The other crazy thing too, there is still a massive steel mill right there. So Cleveland Cliffs has a large steel mill right there. So we can have industry. We can have high quality union jobs making the materials we need and also have clean water. And this is part of the Biden vision. This is part of Bidenomics, that we can have these things, and we are going to have these things.
How come we don't hear enough of that, though, Mike? I mean, the reality is I hear from all of my Red Hat Corps that, if we don't have, the dirty stuff, we're all going to be just standing around looking for windmills to turn when there's no wind, or solar power when there's no sun. And, all of these horror stories. Oh, there was a Tesla electric truck that ran out of juice on a hill. There are always these horror stories that try to lead us away from this. How come we never hear the stuff that you're laying out?
Well, the opposition is pretty well funded. So the oil and gas industry, they don't want change. And so they make sure that people are fed a lot of misinformation and falsehoods. So that's a big part of it. The other part is I think people are afraid to change and they're worried. It's like shifting from a gas vehicle, which I own a gas vehicle. I also own an electric vehicle, both union made. They're fun to drive, but both are fun to drive. But the shift to electric vehicle is a change. And so that's, it takes a little adjustment. And when you're being fed billions of dollars of misinformation from the oil and gas industry and previously the coal industry, it makes it really hard when there's these front groups that are saying, solar panels don't work. Windmills cause cancer, which is what Donald Trump says. It's crazy things like that.
And don't forget the birds.
Yeah. And whereas, you look at data from the Audubon Society, literally the organization to save birds, they say, yes, windmills do kill birds. But you know what kills astronomically more birds than windmills?
Pollution. The
climate crisis.
Yeah.
As well as pollution, air pollution from the fossil fuel industry. So, of course, the Audubon Society supports the build out of wind power. Also, if you've ever seen a windmill, the amount of steel in that thing is massive. So this is also supporting American industry. So to, I think, answer your question is, I think we're fed a lot of hooey from the oil and gas industry, and it just causes chaos in the communication system.
Well, it comes down to, who's been, what was Cicero's Cui Bono, follow the money, or to whose benefit? Yes. Basically, the big corporations are going to benefit. Personally, I would love to have an electric vehicle. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we have the infrastructure yet, but I love the fact that we're moving in that direction. I would love to see more public transit. Get me, reliable bus and train schedules. I would love that more than electric vehicles. But, moving in those directions takes change in policy and investment and a want and a will. Yeah.
Now we're going to get you in a UAW-made Chevy Bolt or an F-150 Lightning, Rick, and you'll see. Right now, actually, I think the infrastructure for at least the 200-mile radius, it's great. Perfect. Especially you charge most days at night. It's amazing. You never look at the gas station. The way the car performs is phenomenal. Yeah. You don't have to fix anything. Never breaks. The long haul piece is one, especially you have experience at driving long haul. That's where the next stage of the infrastructure is going to need to improve. And I would put money down that within the next 5 years, it's not going to be a problem.
No, I'm looking forward to that. I think it's a good thing. And yes, I've heard the electric vehicles are fabulous to drive. The responsiveness, much better, and better for the environment as well. So how do we get to this point? The reality is I think most of us want our kids and grandkids to have a future. How do we get to the point to where we want to be and making these investments? Where do we go?
Yeah. So, if we start looking, month by month, year by year. So for the next few months, the Biden administration has a couple of significant regulations they need to finalize to make sure that power plants for the short term become a lot cleaner. And they use the investments that came from the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill. There's regulations related to to vehicles, light duty and heavy duty vehicles. So the EPA has to finalize those. So we need all those standards come out strong to get finished and finalized and get them implemented. Then we have this little thing in November called an election. We need to make sure that we don't
goes the right way.
Clock back. We keep it going forward. And then from there, there are so many things we can build on what we've already done. We've already invested heavily in the power sector, in the transportation sector. We need to do more for buildings. We need to do more for domestic manufacturing to make sure that we're making the solar panels, the electric vehicle batteries, the steel and cement of the future. We've already started some investments. We need to do a lot more. We need to look at how we can make sure that the air and water is cleaner going forward. So that's a lot more that we can do and should do in 2025 and beyond. And that's the hopeful future we can have if we get the things done right in the next few months to 10 months.
Yeah. And the infrastructure bill, do you think that's going to be sufficient to get us the power that we need? Because there's a lot of talk of, especially on the right, of, our future is all brownouts and, these electric vehicles and all this electrification is going to, zap our grid, because our grid does, from what I understand, need some help. Is that infrastructure bill, is that going to be enough? Do we need more? What's the assessment on that front?
I think the infrastructure bill is going to be, it has brought forth a significant change in our energy grid. And I think we're still going to need more investment. It's always fun to hear our right-wing friends concern trolling us like, oh, no, this is going to fail. And that's going to fail. This is going to fail. Instead of saying, we do need a cleaner, more efficient grid. Why don't we work together to try to make sure this happens? Instead, it's like, no, your idea is wrong. So no. Instead, we can look at it as though the investments from the infrastructure bill are working. They're being put in place now. And we need to do more to make sure that more projects are built in a more timely fashion, and that we have enough people to do the building and operating in these facilities. And that probably most importantly, they're paid well and treated well.
Yeah. And look, on the infrastructure front and our grid, I remember Jerry Brown running for president back in 92, running on the platform of we're going to rewire the country because so much electricity is lost in transmission. So even if we just did a lot of that, I think a lot of our electrical needs would be lessened. But Mike, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thanks, Rick. I appreciate it.
Mike Williams, senior fellow there at the Center for American Progress, AmericanProgress.org, the website. I want to hear your thoughts. Excited about the electric vehicle future, the new economy, and the jobs that come with it? I know I am. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks for tuning in to The Rick Smith Show. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Rick Smith Show, like us on Facebook, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find all that and much more at thericksmithshow.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I go back to what President Biden said during the State of the Union about, the recovery coming out of the pandemic, rebuilding our manufacturing base, all the good stuff that's been done. And the comment, and a major shot at our media, saying that, we're living the greatest comeback never told. And I got to tell you, I think that was brilliant and completely off script. I looked through all the transcripts, could not find that anywhere. But he's right. The greatest comeback never told, because our media is still focused on the horse race, not on the stuff that's actually been getting done and the differences between the two candidates. So let's hope we can move in a better direction. But here to share some thoughts on the greatest comeback never told and the manufacturing jobs that the president talked about in the State of the Union, I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, the website. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, great to be with you.
So the greatest comeback never told. I thought that was a brilliant line and sadly accurate.
Yeah. If you look at the data, you'd be like, this is one heck of a comeback story. That's absolutely right. Any economy anywhere in the world at any time would be happy to cut and paste exactly what we have right now. Okay. For most people. And I think the issue, unfortunately, is that some people are, either politicizing the economic recovery, and we are seeing way more of that than we used to, is that your political persuasion is certainly coloring the way you feel about the economy. But the other aspect of this is that, to the extent there's a villain in all of this, the corporations that have kept some prices higher at the grocery store or whatever, or because of concentrated market power, are the ones to blame. And certainly not this administration's policies, which have almost across the board tried to bring down costs for the American people, generate job creation, and build an economy that's going to be resilient in the future as well.
Yeah. Now, President Biden asked the question, where is it written that America can't lead the world in manufacturing? And as he says this, my mind immediately goes to, the Business Roundtable. That's where it's written, because these are the folks who decide shrinkflation and greedflation and all of the other things that has brought us the obscene prices that we're being socked with. And the numbers are pretty clear. I mean, there have been a number of studies that say, look, 52% of all the inflation is because, corporate greed. It's more for them, less for us. And I don't know that we hear that message enough.
No, you're right. We don't. There are some people who are articulating it, but it is fundamentally, I think, the biggest reason why we have the challenges, both in terms of if you look at ticket prices, consumer prices, or if you look at how we're shaping economic policy. The global corporations that are based here in the United States but have operations across the world, they love the protection that the U.S. court system gives to them, that the educational system gives to them, that patent protection, research and development gives to them, that the stability in our country, even though it's not perfect, still gives to them. And they hate constraints like, maybe if you get some of that benefit, you got to make more of your stuff here, or you got to pass on some of the savings to consumers rather than just more buybacks for your shareholders. And so it does become a question of priorities. And I think that ought to be exposed. And, the other aspect of this is that the administration just needs to keep lifting up the success stories, because there are a bunch of them all across America of a new economy that's being born and much more economic resilience that we need so that we don't face the future unprepared. And I think that is an important story. And maybe, Rick, it's not top of mind because that's looking way ahead rather than just.
We're tip of the nose thinkers. I mean, a lot of us are tip of the nose, sadly, and it's I get it. Look, you're trying to get through the day. You don't have time to worry about what tomorrow's going to bring. You got to get through today. I get that, but at some point you got to go. We've got to look to the future in some light.
Yeah, you do. You really do. And so that's where I'm glad that the president laid out what the strategy was, the investments that we made, along with, being tough on China and having Buy America policies, and the combination of that, what is creating. And it is real. And, it's added, hundreds of thousands of manufacturing jobs over the last couple of years, a record boom in factory construction. We are remaking the way that we get energy, and those costs will come down. And also that the goods we need, we're going to make more of them here in the United States. That's not to say that we don't face a lot of headwinds and a lot of bumps in the road along the way, but that's exactly the right strategy to be pursuing.
No, I'm right there with you. But yesterday, New York Times had an article that came out that on China, saying China's exports are surging, and they said get ready for the global backlash. And in the article they point out that China already produces a third of all manufactured goods on this planet, more than us, Germany, Japan, South Korea, all combined. And when you go, where is it said that we can't be the world's manufacturer? Well, I don't know. It's not looking good.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a direct result of three things. First of all, the Chinese government, like it or not, has a plan to on its economy to make sure that its unemployment problems are exported somewhere else, and that if it needs to attain growth, it'll find a way to do that through subsidies or economic manipulation. So that's number one. Number two, the response of all the other countries who are impacted by this up until very recently has been non-existent. It has been really bad. And so we have a situation where we've had we've had a couple of decades of looking the other way. And by the way, so is Europe, so is everywhere else. But now it's come home to roost, and we've had we've had a lot of economic damage here in the United States over the last couple of decades, as well as Europe seeing it. And so there's more measures being taking place, because we have seen this song and dance before. And every time there is a crisis, the Chinese government looks to take advantage of it and to increase its kind of market share. It's kind of like the tug of war.
Right.
And it gradually wants to move that rope its way by any means possible. The problem is, for the rest of us, like in the United States, we're sacrificing good jobs, economic security, a lot of different things. And I think finally enough people in both parties are standing up and saying, no, we can't let this happen anymore.
And this is, pushing back against corporate wants. And ultimately, I got to believe this is corporations, our business roundtable folks going, oh, this is actually going to hurt us. When it was gaining them massive quarterly profits, when they were being able to shed jobs and shut factories here and be able to make millions and millions of dollars, it was all fine, well, and good. But the Chinese weren't stupid. They wouldn't allow U.S. companies to go in there and own them. They stole the technology. They subsidized their own industries, and they're basically crushing our businesses, or at least that's how I see it. And now you've got corporate America going, well, maybe government do something to bail us out again. And that's the frustrating part, because you got people like Trump running around going, we got stupid people running our government. This was brought to us by corporate interests. This was the business roundtable's wet dream fantasy that they got come true, and now it's biting them in the behind.
You're right. I did a Rick Perry thing there. I named the two things, but not the third thing, and you just named it, which is that the corporations were happy to see this happen because they could lower their cost of production and also expand their consumer market. And so it meant more profits for their CEOs, and it meant more returns for their investors and their shareholders. So they were more than happy to go along with all of this for a very long time. Now, here's the deal. It's like the Chinese government. It's like, you know what? We have your technology. We have your expertise now. We don't really need you anymore. So see you later. You may not have access to our market anymore. And these companies are like, what happened? Wait, what happened to us? And they're looking to move other places now. And so they were the enablers of all of this. And so it is what needs to happen is that it is past time that our government listens to the voices of workers here in the United States. And again, we've started to see this reflected in trade policy and the types of industrial policies and investments that we're making, so that we're really doing this in a thoughtful way that's going to rebuild capacity in the United States, going to create good jobs here, and that we're going to shake free of that corporate influence over our trade and economic policy. And I'm just going to say, Trump may have put tariffs on, but he didn't invest in this country. And his tax policies were business as usual for those global corporations. And so, tariffs alone don't change the playing field. They are one element of it, but you need everything, moving in the right direction to get a good outcome for American workers.
No, I absolutely agree. And I'm glad you highlighted the fact that Trump didn't do anything outside of slapping some tariffs on, and certainly didn't do anything globally. The one thing that I like that Biden has done is he's reached out to our allies. He's reached out to other countries to get involved in things. And I think the backlash that's coming against China because of their mercantilist policies, I got to believe is going to be led by us here in the U.S. And ultimately, because look, we're the ones who led this disaster and led everyone into China going, no, they're okay. Let's give them permanent normal trade relations. Let's bring them in. And it'll be good for everyone because we want war and all this other stuff. And now I think we've wakened up to the reality that, well, none of that stuff really worked out. And I hope that whoever wins in November takes that, brings the world together and gives us a lot more power. Because, I was reading the article at the New York Times and they quoted the former trade representative under George W. Bush, this Susan Schwab, saying there are no rules to stop dumping and subsidizing products to undercut your exports. So it doesn't matter what we do here, it still harms us around the world.
Yeah, it sure does. And I think that's the issue, is that we had a philosophy that we injected into policy. And it was, by the way, a philosophy from a textbook that really never worked in the real world or was really never applied. And so we did this whole neoliberal kind of free trade experiment and kind of like with a light regulatory touch. And then the results were also terrible, and it didn't do anything. It didn't democratize, didn't open up, didn't move China towards any of the norms. Look, I wasn't surprised. I'm sure you weren't surprised, but everybody who said, well, the textbook said it could have done this, where they were like, wow, what happened here? But now we're all living with this. And we need to throw that away and have a new approach here. And Rick, you probably remember, this must have been a couple decades ago, where municipalities used to put their trash on a barge and send it looking for a landfill that would accept it. I remember this very vividly from like the waste management wars before there was a lot of recycling or whatever. Well, that's going to be Chinese automobiles. They're going to be putting them on a barge, and they're going to be docking in a whole bunch of places and seeing where they're going to be let off. And obviously, for consumers, they're going to be like, oh, wow, I can pay $11,000 for an automobile. Sign me up. But that's going to devastate factories around the world. And so we're seeing this already. I mean, BYD, this big Chinese auto company, largest EV manufacturer in the world, has its own barges, put 7,000 cars on one of its ships and sailed and made it to Europe and offloaded some before that, but 3,500 there. And now the Europeans are saying, hey, we got to stop this. And so it's going to be bad in the United States if we allow this to happen. We cannot afford to replay this song, because it is going to have even worse consequences for American workers and our economy.
No, and if we do nothing, it's even worse than before, because we now know better. Because as you pointed out, the textbook didn't work. And as I've always said about, the textbook says, I used to coach football. Every play I ever drew up scored a touchdown. Whether it was I needed an inch on my own 1 yard line, it still went 99 yards for a touchdown. Now on the field, never really worked out that way. But on paper, it was glorious. And that was our trade policy. And it's worked out that, we've gotten sacked in the end zone, and now we've got work to do. But in talking about the price of things, I'm getting, both sides, the right and the left, going, well, we can't have tariffs because it's going to raise prices on consumers. So what's the argument in that world going, well, we get cheap goods, Scott. We should let them dump in here because we as consumers, we get cheap stuff.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's not as cheap as you think, number one. And you end up, honestly, we've talked about this before, in garments or whatever, you end up with a replacement rate that's greater than if you had a higher quality product that you paid a little more for. So your cost netted out over 5 or 10 years is probably going to be more for all that crap that you're buying. And second, the cost is not, there are externalities, which is, a fancy economic term, which means there is a higher cost to this, but it's borne by other people. It's borne by workers who are exploited in China. It's borne by workers who lost those job opportunities in the United States. It's borne by the greenhouse gas emissions that we're all going to have to pay for in some way. So to think that this is a costless proposition, if it's cheap enough that it seems too ridiculous, it is, because those costs are landing somewhere else in the future. And we're, again, to your point, we don't look past our noses too much. And so from that line of sight, it seems like a great deal. But if you look 5-10 years down the road, it is a terrible, terrible deal. And just say the Biden economic policies are designed that we have more control over what we make here. And if there's more competition, if there's more stuff made here, that way, and we can control our inventories, and we're going to have more abundant, cheaper energy, we can bring all of those costs down. It's not going to happen overnight, but it will happen. But we're never going to be able to match that ridiculous price that you can get on one of those Chinese shopping apps, or if one of those EVs rolls in, because that's not a real price. Yeah. It's totally artificial.
And it's meant to destroy other industries, whether it's here in the U.S. or across the globe, so that they can eventually dominate manufacturing. Not just a third of all of manufacturing being done there, but eventually all of it. And I've said, look, I don't want to make an enemy out of China. I'm not a fan of the Communist Party there, but I don't want to make an enemy out of the Chinese workers. It's my view that we should be pushing for more domestic production, domestic consumption in China, so that the people of China can buy those EVs and the cars that they make domestically. But that doesn't seem to be happening at all. It seems like all their model is export their problems, keep the cheap labor, keep the exploitable labor, the slave labor, and export all those problems to destroy everybody else. And I'm hoping that we eventually, as a globe, say enough is enough.
Yeah, and that is the rub right there, is that, there is a built-in consumer market in China, if they were to invest in it, that could absorb a lot of that. But that is not the model that the Chinese government follows. It is all about building up productive capacity without regard to what the market says, and then shipping that stuff over, getting those returns, and doing the same thing. And, we talk about economic bubbles. That is an economic bubble, unfortunately. And the problem is that the impact is mostly felt by workers who are in competition with those Chinese products. And that's why governments like the EU, for the first time, as well as the United States, are starting to stand up and say, look, we can't abide by this anymore.
It's about time. I had someone say, well, you're talking about a trade war. I'm going, hello, we've been in a trade war for a very long time. You just didn't realize it.
Yeah, it's been largely a one-sided trade war where we took all of the damage. All you got to do is look around some of those industrial towns all over the country that have been hollowed out. We need to rebuild those, and we're not going to be able to do it unless we level set on trade policy and keep those investments going.
There it is. Scott, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. Look forward to having you back again real soon.
You bet, Rick. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Our good friend Scott Paul. Make sure you check out their website, Alliance for AmericanManufacturing.org. Scott's the president there of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1946. That was the day that United Auto Worker members won an 18.5-cent hourly raise after a 4-month strike against General Motors. After World War II, workers grew increasingly frustrated. The war years were a time of labor peace, as most unions agreed not to go out on strike in order to support the war production efforts. But during the war, as companies raked in profits, many workers felt that they were not receiving a fair share. Worse, wartime shortages saw the price of consumer goods skyrocket. A dollar simply could not stretch as far as it once had. After the war ended, the workers wanted to make up for the ground they felt they had lost during the conflict. A wave of strikes washed over the United States. Walter Reuther led the auto workers out on strike on November 21st, 1945. Their demand was a 30% raise. Reuther publicly argued that General Motors could afford to pay the raise without raising the price of their cars. He urged the company to open its books so the public could see their finances. The UAW laid out its reasoning in a report entitled Purchasing Power for Prosperity. The strike wore on for more than 100 days, but the union had done a good job making its case to the public. Finally, General Motors agreed to a raise. as well as improved benefits, such as a better recognition of seniority and promotions and protections for the union members. The contract was seen as a huge step forward for organized labor to take a seat at the table with capital. The strike and its settlement solidified Ruther as the leader of the UAW and a powerful voice for workers. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So again, I want to go back to this because I think it's important. The fact that finally U.S. policymakers are going, this is a bad idea. We're getting crushed by the Chinese. We're literally in a trade war. They're eating our lunch, whatever analogy you want to use. They're bullying us, however you want to frame that. But finally, someone's awakened to that reality. And it's something that we've been talking about here on this program for, almost 19 years of being on this program, because it only makes sense that if you're dealing with the Communist Party of China, their goal is to take care of their people first, export their problems, gain all the profit. And what they did, and you got to give them credit, they enticed our greed class to do what they're born, bred, and trained to do, and that is be greedy. And they offered them, cheap, exploitable labor, virtually no environmental regulations whatsoever. Basically, it was the Wild West. Corporate America, come in and do what you want, rape and pillage. The world is your oyster. Manufacture what you want. But oh, by the way, we're not going to allow you to own the companies here. We're going to have a Chinese firm have control of that. And oh, by the way, all of your technology, we're going to steal. Not all at once, but slowly. And the technology we can't steal, we're going to retro-engineer anyway. So, we're going to use you for everything that you're worth. And then once we've sucked you dry, we're going to discard you. Now, that's down the road further. Finally, some people have awakened and listen to us here at this program. And this is where I give Trump credit. Trump, this was something that he got. And you have to give him credit where credit is due. But because he was the one pointing out the problem, he doesn't have the solution or the ability to do what actually needs to be done, and that is to reorganize the world. We need to have another Bretton Woods Accord. We need to have another global idea of what direction we're going. Because look, having the cheapest stuff, like China does, China's got cheap stuff. We're going to bring in the EVs. We're going to sell them for $11,000. We're going to crush the U.S. auto industry completely, put them done. Does it matter that the EVs are cheap if you don't have jobs to buy them? Does it matter how cheap you get these products when you don't have industries of your own? And oh, by the way, if there ever is, something that you don't like China doing, do you have the capacity to stand up and say no? Because once you lose your manufacturing base, your ability to produce things, and this has been the national security implication of destroying our steel industry, of destroying our auto industry, destroying our shipbuilding industry, destroying all of the industries that, I don't know, actually did make America great. If you don't have that capacity, well, you're going to be subservient. And those prices, as we're finding out now, not so cheap. And especially as Scott Paul pointed out, the reality is when you cost things out over the long term, it's not cheaper. It's actually more expensive by the time you replace things and over and over and over again. But hey, at least we got some cheap stuff. But we've also got hollowed out communities. And I think the president talked about this in the State of the Union address. The fact that, when these companies, left, what they left behind was a major hole. A hole not just in the economy, but in the soul of community. And bringing back these jobs, which, there's been a bunch of, reports lately that, overwhelmingly Biden's policies are helping people who hate him. In red areas, they're bringing manufacturing back. And it's benefiting the people who hate him the most and who want the other guy, who is going to do nothing to ensure that those jobs can thrive. Because understand, I've been saying for the longest time, we need policies based on domestic production for domestic consumption. If you do not have consumers to buy your goods, doesn't matter how cheap they are. If they can't steal them, sorry, not going to work. But just my thoughts. I want to hear yours. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, by all means, download the podcast. Always there, always available. And as always, appreciate you being here. We'll see you back here next time. Thanks for tuning in to The Rick Smith Show. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @Rick Smith Show, like us on Facebook, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find all that and much more at thericksmithshow.com.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.